I think Well, good morning. We are excited about the success Florida's had, and we're very excited about the opportunity to build off that success with the budget for the next fiscal year. Since 2019, we've led the nation in GDP growth amongst large states. Since 2020, we've led the nation in net in-migration. We are ranked #1 for talent development, education freedom, higher education, new business formations, and we have the lowest unemployment rate amongst all large states and have consistently had that since the summer of 2020. So now's the time to build off that success. We know what works, and we need to continue to double down on those efforts. Our budget is called a focus on fiscal responsibility because that is what we are doing. We're showing that you could be fiscally responsible, respect taxpayers, and yet still deliver on the main promises that you made and the main public needs of our people. Budget I've proposed is a top line of $115.6 billion. That represents a spending reduction of $3 billion over current year. In our budget, we are reducing the number of government full-time employees by 741 on net. So there are parts where we need to beef up, but the overall reduction, once you do the pluses and minuses, it's a negative 741. So that's a strong reduction in government FTEs. We will have a minimum of $14.6 billion in reserve, which is incredibly strong historically. Over $4 billion in unallocated general revenue. Now, the first part of the fiscal year, we've had revenue come in over estimate. Still, not as much as maybe we did 2 years ago, but still, we anticipate continuing to see that over these next months. So we likely will have even more than that. But $4.2 billion unallocated GR. Just to put that in perspective, when I became governor, we had about $1 billion in unallocated GR, and that was the standard amount of money that people would say you need, $1 billion in unallocated GR. The Budget Stabilization Fund, our rainy day fund, will top out at $4.9 billion. When I became governor in 2019, the Budget Stabilization Fund had about $1.4 billion in it, so we've more than tripled our rainy day fund over these last 6 years. We are also proposing to continue and to expand our accelerated debt repayment program. So we started this a couple years ago, understanding that even though Florida had low debt per capita, we had an opportunity to retire it sooner and at considerable savings to taxpayers. And so if our accelerated program in this budget is adopted, by the end of the upcoming fiscal year, we will have retired 49% of the state's total historical debt from the time Florida became a state until I became governor. And I think that you have an opportunity to do even more in the following year. So that makes us and will solidify us as having the lowest per capita state debt anywhere in the United States. The budget has major tax reductions. We've got a number of tax holidays. Some of these are oldies but goodies. Things like 14-day back-to-school sales tax holiday. We're going to continue with our Freedom Month for the month of July, where you have tax-free on all these great activities. We are also going to have our 2 disaster preparedness tax holidays. Unfortunately, those have been things that people has come in handy for folks over these last couple hurricane seasons. We're going to have a tool time tax holiday of 7 days yet again, and that's been very, very popular. We are adding a marine fuel tax holiday, which will help our boaters and our anglers be able to save money when they're fueling up their vessels. And then we are unveiling the Second Amendment summer tax holiday. So from Memorial Day till the 4th of July, you can get your ammunition, your firearms, and your accoutrements tax-free in the state of Florida. The biggest tax cut that we're proposing for this fiscal year will actually require 2 years, but it is the total elimination of the business rent tax. Florida is one of the few states, and maybe the only state, that taxes business rent. So if you want businesses to start, even though we're #1 in business formations, if you want these businesses to succeed and they're having to rent or lease property for their business operations, why would you tax that lease. It just doesn't make sense. Even very liberal states don't do that. So we're proposing, we've brought it down a lot since I've been governor, but we're proposing to put that on the path to elimination within 2 years. We also are proposing $170 million in tax relief for home buyers by putting a moratorium on the intangible tax for residential mortgages up to a value of $500,000. $500,000 used to be, a pretty significant house. Now it's kind of the run-of-the-mill middle-class house, but we think that can be helpful as people continue to see. I mean, these interest rates are terrible. You have not seen, even as interest rates went up, a lot of people thought that the market may correct. The prices really, haven't really come down for new home purchases. And so something's got to give on the market. We want to be able to help people get into a new home. Law enforcement and state fire, we're proposing massive pay increases for all state LEs and for our state firefighters. 20% increase for all entry-level state sworn law enforcement and veteran sworn LEOs, 25% increase. We are also proposing a 25% increase for all state fire, and we appreciate their service. And of course, we're putting in the budget something that's been wildly successful, another $23 million for the recruitment bonus program. You've had sheriffs have used this, police chiefs have used it, we've used it with Highway Patrol and FDLE and some of these to bring in, not just bring in from other states, but new recruits who are young, who haven't been in law enforcement before, get them into this, and you get that $5,000 bonus, and people have really, really appreciated it. We're continuing to support education efforts across the state of Florida. This budget proposes a FEFP of $29.7 billion. That is a record by far. The $9,205 per pupil is also a record, and that represents an increase of $222 over current fiscal year. Budget also contemplates $95 increase in the base student allocation. Of all of that, one of the things that we're most proud of is we started a categorical provision in the budget for teacher pay increases, because people would say increase education spending, and then you'd see it and it gets chewed up by bureaucracy or doesn't lead to higher teacher salaries, because ultimately, I think most people know this, the state of Florida, we don't set teacher salaries. That's done on a district by district basis. Sometimes those are negotiations between districts and the school unions, and the school unions, quite frankly, have other interests. They're not necessarily just looking to help teachers. So we said, why would we just flush all this money down if we have no guarantee that this is going to be something that is going to benefit teachers? And so the categorical that we started, I think the first year was $500 million. We are now proposing a $1.5 billion teacher pay categorical, which locks in the gains and then adds about $250 million on top of what we've already done. And that's not just for district teachers, that also applies to our charter school teachers, and we're very proud of the success that our charter schools have had. I think if you look at the performance there, that would be very strong throughout the entire country if our charter population of almost 400,000 students was its own state. Bright Future scholarships in this budget are fully funded. We're very proud of the fact that if you're a good student and you want to attend one of our state universities and you got the grades and you got the board scores, that you can get a free ride or 75% depending on where you rank. That makes getting a quality education without going deep into debt something that is attainable for all these talented, hardworking students. We are also ensuring in the budget that we will have yet another year of no tuition increases at our state colleges or universities. We have the best value for Florida residents of any state in the country by a country mile. I think the average tuition is about $6,300. Most private K through 12 schools charge more than that. Some of them charge way more than that. And so I don't think you can get a better education with that price anywhere in the country. And there's a lot of places where their in-state tuition is $15,000, $20,000 for some of these state universities. So we're really proud of holding the line on tuition. We want it to be affordable for people. And as somebody who, I had to work all these jobs when I was kind of going through and playing sports, I'm doing that, which is fine. But I also had to take out loans. Isn't it great where you can go, if you're a good student, you can get it paid for, really high quality. But even if you don't reach that level, working just part-time jobs to pay this tuition is attainable for anybody. So we're proud of that, and we're going to keep that going. We're also proud of the historic success we've had on conservation efforts and protecting Florida's natural resources and Everglades restoration. This budget calls for $1.5 billion for Everglades restoration and water quality projects, over $800 million of that just for Everglades restoration. The amount of progress that we've made on that is truly historic. Water is flowing south like we haven't seen in many, many decades. Salinity levels in places like Florida Bay are much better than they were 5 or 6 years ago. Things like raising the Tamiami Trail, and we're going to do part 2 of that, has let massive amounts of water. The reservoirs that we've built, and we have the one on the west side of Lake Okeechobee is going to come online this year. Huge thing. Remember, before I became governor, 2016, massive discharges to the St. Lucie estuary. Stewart was under slime. 2018, the year before I came in, you had massive discharges, massive problems with the algae blooms on the west coast of Florida. You've really seen that moderate huge. Now, the Trump administration, when they were in the first time, they really kicked the Army Corps in the rear, said, hey, you guys got to manage this lake better. That was a huge help. But I think because we've increased capacity for the water to flow south, for the water to be cleaned, we've obviated the need for them to do major. Now, we're not fully where we need to be because the Army Corps has work to do on the reservoir on the east side of Lake Okeechobee. We did our part. We got it up. They still have problems. And then the Everglades agricultural area reservoir that they are way behind schedule on. One of the things we're going to be asking the president is, look, the Army Corps, I mean, there's snail's pace and then there's Army Corps pace. The slowest, most cumbersome bureaucracy I've ever seen. So we don't have time to waste on this. And even just things like permitting, it takes them forever. So even the projects that are ours, we can't permit as quickly, even close as we need to. So we are going to be asking for both the permitting authority, but then also just block grant us the money for the Everglades agricultural area reservoir. We'll take the money, we'll build it, and I guarantee you we will build it much quicker and have it completed much sooner than anything the Army Corps would do. Nevertheless, even without the federal government doing, and I know the president is of the mind that he wants to do that, but it's been historic, and we're going to keep putting the foot on the gas on this and keep going forward. We've also had historic success in transportation and infrastructure. This budget calls for a $13.8 billion FDOT work program. That also doesn't necessarily include the Moving Florida Forward funds that we did. I mean, we had all this revenue that we had sitting there from the surpluses. The reserves were even more than they are now. I think the reserves got up to 18-20 billion. Yes, we reduced taxes. Yes, we did Everglades education. We were doing things, but we knew that we needed to accelerate these projects. So you have projects that are breaking ground now that weren't scheduled to even start till next decade. Things are going to be done 5 years, 10 years, 15 years ahead of schedule, depending on the project. And that's just the reality. The state's growing. We are not recruiting people to move to Florida. We like what we have. It's a free country. People can do that because we understand there are challenges when people come. But the reality is that's just what's happened. So we have a great emphasis. I mean, if you look at I-4, what's been done already has been great. But then you look at what's going to happen is this into the Polk County area, Champions Gate, all these terrible traffic log jams that are going to be alleviated when these projects are done. Some of the stuff in Southwest Florida, you got the Miami project, you got stuff in the Panhandle, Tampa Bay. All these things are going to be done so much earlier than what they were originally scheduled to be. So we're going to keep our eye on the ball on that. We also are mindful that we have many Florida homeowners. So yes, we're doing the reduction for new purchases. We also are doing the Hometown Heroes program to help people with those down payments. But for people that have homes, particularly in these hurricane-stricken areas, you have people that are on waiting lists for My Safe Florida Home program. We restarted that program a few years back, and I think it's been very successful. People have been able to get grants. They've been able to improve their homes, harden them. It's moderated and even reduced insurance rates for people in many respects, and it's protected them better against the storms that ended up coming. We recently proposed in the special session for the legislature to fund the folks that are on the wait list. That did not happen. We still think that needs to be done. We've got folks that went through the program that the legislature did. They got the inspection or waiting inspection. They qualified. Now they need the grant, but the program ran out of money. So we are funding the wait list as well as having $100 million recurring going forward. And I think the program's proven to be successful, and I know that's very popular. Could we keep up with total demand for it? Maybe not, because it's probably unlimited demand, but certainly those folks that are on the wait list now, we want to make sure that we get that done so that they can make the improvements that they need. So all in all, this is a really good place for the state of Florida to be in. You look at some of these other states, you have some of these states that have massive deficits. They have some of these states that have all these unfunded liabilities. We've been able to do it right. We've had good partners in the legislature over these many years. I'm really thankful for the last 2 years. You had both Speaker Renner and Senate President Pasadomo. They really embraced our debt repayment. That's been huge. Of course, I think you've always had support in the legislature for tax reductions. You've had big support for our environmental initiatives, which wasn't necessarily the case before I became governor. So we've got a lot of momentum. We need to keep the momentum going, and I'm confident that this focus on fiscal responsibility budget will do just that. Okay, we got any questions?
Governor, the state parks proposal, $69 million for infrastructure enforcement, does that have anything to do with the proposal from last year with pickleball courts and golf courses?
So there was never, last year you had a bureaucrat wrote a memo and leaked it and tried to create a narrative. There was never anything that was proposed at all, and we're not proposing anything. I mean, there be people that have asked for this stuff to be in there, but we're not proposing any of that. We're going to maintain what we have and do whatever necessary it is to alleviate any damage or any depreciation, but that's the extent of it.
On paying down state debt, what exactly is the benefit to Floridians for paying it down now? Oftentimes these include financial penalties for paying off debt.
No. What they're doing is, and you can talk to these folks who do a really good job, but they will buy on the open market these bonds at reduced rates. And so we put out the report on the last meeting. Ben Watkins, go review his testimony from the last cabinet meeting. They ended up saving taxpayers, I think it was like $130 million in interest. And so you are saving money. And also it's just the case that we have a AAA credit rating. We have a better credit rating than the U.S. government. We have a better credit rating than most of our peer states. This is something that shows we're built for the long haul. You could eliminate this debt, I think, if you had another 5-10 years of real good fiscal stewardship. I think you could. But it is also the case that when money is cheap and you have to do certain projects, you don't want to incur debt to spend irresponsibly. But in a state like Florida that's growing, I mean, we've got to do certain infrastructure things, right? We've got to do education when people are moving in and whatnot. So there are times when you would want to maybe incur because you can get the money, it's cheap, and then you can go. Now is not one of those times because the rates are not favorable for us, but we've been able to do this. And yes, we are saving taxpayer money, but I think also just it solidifies Florida's fiscal posture as being a state that's really doing right. It gives people confidence to invest in Florida, because when people make big investments here, it's not just for this budget. It's like, what's it going to look like in 10 or 20 years? And I think that unless something changes to where people really want to revert in a different direction, we should be built for the long haul. Yes, sir.
Governor, do you expect pushback from the legislature for the 2A tax holiday and open carry, and are you willing to call a special session for it if they fight back?
So on the tax relief for the ammo and the firearms and the accoutrements, I think this is going to be wildly popular. Why would they want to fight back on that? This is something that their voters would expect them to support. And what I say on this stuff is, you don't have to agree with me, right? It's like you run, if you ran as saying you were going to be weak on Second Amendment and you come up here and do that, I can disagree with you, but honestly, I can't really get worked up. But I think if people run saying they're strong on it and then the actions don't match the campaign rhetoric, that's when voters get frustrated with it. And so something like the open carry, I don't know that anyone runs saying they oppose it, but yet somehow it just doesn't end up getting done. But I can tell you on the tax holiday, it's a relatively modest amount. What is it, like 8 million, Brandy, or 10 million? Yeah, so it's not a lot of money, but I think it'll be meaningful for people who are, I mean, we've got people that habitually are at the range. We've got other folks that just like collecting. You know, we're a state where there's a lot of interest in that. Now, our policies, you know, recently may not have, 2018 have matched necessarily, but since I've been governor, they have matched and we've made progress. But obviously, there's a lot more to do. So this is just one thing that I think is good. I think the voters will appreciate it. And the marine tax as well is a new one, holiday. We've got a lot of folks. We're very proud of what we've done for our anglers. Now, helping the water quality and all that makes a difference, and we're proud of that. But if you look at the Gulf red snapper, we're doing over 100 days. We're managing it. The federal government has said, we looked at the data, we looked at the fish. They're there, massive numbers of fish, and yet if you do the old data, they would act like these things are about to be extinct. Totally not true. So we said, we're going to follow actual facts. We're going to listen to the people that are actually out there. And this has been huge. People are so fired up about it. One of the things we're going to be asking for from the federal government is let us manage Atlantic's red snapper just like we do Gulf. And if we're able to do that, you're going to have more than 2 days in the Atlantic to be able to fish. And I think it's important that we do it. And the data, everything about the data is antiquated that says there's no fish there. You talk to these guys that are out there, they are there in abundance.
Governor, you've got Congresswoman Luna, I think, on social media suggesting that there is a deal in place between the legislature and the executive on the immigration bill. Have you made any headway with the legislative leaders on what you'd like to see with the immigration bill?
We've had great discussions. I think we're going to land the plane. So I don't necessarily have an announcement now, but I'm pretty sure we're going to get there. And I always thought we would. I mean, look, sometimes things happen. It does. But, I've been doing this now with a lot of these guys for the last 6 years. If you look at Florida, other states have come here to try to learn what we're doing. And some of the stuff may be executive, but a lot of it is to follow what legislation these legislators have passed. So they've passed bold initiatives across a wide variety of subject matter and really help lead the nation. Part of the reason why we've gone from a deficit of 300,000 registered Republicans to now close to 1.2 million, because people do respond to that leadership. And while I am the most well-known of all the folks up here, the reality is that the legislature has had a huge role to play in that. And I just think it wouldn't be within their character of their more recent actions to not aggressively address illegal immigration, given the historic moment. And I know that the voters, look, I give credit to a lot of the members, they're listening to the voters. Voters have been very, very firm on what they expect. And so when you're elected, you listen to the people that sent you there and you make sure that you're following through with that. So I do think that you're going to see that plane land. It's all about the policy. Like, let's not worry about any of this other stuff. There's always dissonance. There's always, people want to throw some sand in the gears for all these other reasons. But what's the policy? Are we doing policy that's going to make a difference? Are we doing what we told the voters we said we were going to do? And if you do that, you're going to see everyone be happy, and then we can move on to the next set of issues. So I do think we're going to get the job done, and I look forward to working with, a lot of these guys. I mean, look, like a lot of the senators, a lot of these guys were House members when I first became governor. I endorsed most of these people to be able to get in, and I wouldn't have done that if I didn't think that they were good conservative members that would support conservative policy. And so it's not. I think it was an aberration last week. I do think we're gonna be united on this issue, and then we can move forward. So I look forward to working and continuing to have those discussions.
You had a 11-page bill in there that, in your recommendations, to make some changes to the Family Empowerment Scholarship. What are you looking to do there?
Is that just more? That's more like the technical changes. Yeah, I mean, I don't know that it's anything dramatic. I think that there are just some, look, this is a program at scale no other state has done, and so I think that there's little things, but I don't think it's anything that's really substantively going to change the intent of the program.
You have a bill related to the Department of State that has to do with arts funding, which was a bit of a, you got some pushback a little bit on that last year, but
Every time I roll out of bed, Gary, I get pushed back. That's the nature of the job, man.
But it would appear that you want to give the Secretary of State a little bit more leeway and control over evaluating the proposals, and then you also had some language about making things, funding only go to age appropriate.
Well, there's a couple things. So last year, I had just set the line. I said, we're not going to spend more than we did the year before. So I told the leaders of the legislature, I said, listen, this is where I'm at. Because sometimes they'll ask me, well, how much do you want to veto? I'm fine vetoing nothing. Like, it's not like, oh, Bill, I vetoed. Like, I don't care about that. But I wanted the top line to be where it was. So we got to the point where we're jockeying for that, trying to get that top line down. And what really harmed some of the cultural stuff was the amount of wokeness that had been underwritten by some of those. And the question is the way I view it is if, like, I'm walking down the street and a police officer comes up to me, or a small business owner, somebody, and says, Governor, why are we spending money on X? I've got to be able to say and give them an explanation. If you say, why are we spending money on gender theory, ideology, and so, I can't give an answer to that. So I thought it was too much into the DEI, into the woke stuff, and so we did that. And I know that not everyone was doing that. I get it, but it was a critical mass, and it had gotten out of hand. So what we want is, we don't want to underwrite things that our taxpayers are just going to reject. So there needs to be some standards there. And then what we also said on this is, we are going to provide a preference to folks who are supporting or doing things to celebrate America's 250th anniversary. We want to have events during this current calendar year, and then next year. I think you can get a lot of cultural aspects in this, a lot of art aspects into this, to celebrate the great heritage of our country. So yes, there's money in there. No, we're not going to fund the woke ideology, but we are understanding that some of this stuff can be beneficial. And so I hope we get better kilter. But I do think with this opportunity for the 250th, there's a lot of great opportunities for arts and history to really embrace that. It's a chance to kind of come together as Floridians and as Americans.
What are your thoughts on the return of the Amendment 3 initiative? There's a new marijuana ballot initiative. What are your thoughts on it?
So I think that you have one corporation that's pushing this. People do not want these massive conglomerates to control the Constitution. And one of the things that was an issue last time was this idea of, can you grow your own? And their amendment did not provide for that. As I read this one, what they say is they don't give you that right. They say, well, the legislature's allowed to. But guess what will happen if this passes? Do you think they're going to lobby in favor of you growing your own or against? Of course, they're going to lobby against, and they have a lot of money to be able to try to influence the legislature as a result of that. Here's the thing. There's a lot of different perspectives on marijuana. It should not be in our Constitution. If you feel strongly about it, you have elections for the legislature, go back candidates that you believe will be able to deliver what your vision is on that. But when you put these things in the Constitution, and I think, the way they wrote, there's all kinds of things going on in here. I think it's going to have big time trouble getting through the Florida Supreme Court. And I honestly, as written, I don't think it will even be on the ballot. But the reality is the Constitution should really be for structure of government, limiting, empowering certain, I think, for example, limiting tax increases. If you want to empower something, there's a whole bunch of things you can use it for. But run-of-the-mill policy should not be. Now, I know it's been used for that over the years, but it does not end well. That's what California has done. They use these ballot initiatives, and they do all this policy there, and then they end up with a state that's basically ungovernable. So if you're going to amend the Constitution, make it so that saying, look at the U.S. Constitution. Look at the things that have been added to the U.S. Constitution. would they just add, I mean, could you have gone to James Madison in 1792 after the Bill of Rights is passed and said, Mr. Congressman Madison, would you do an amendment for pregnant pig care in the U.S. Of course, it would have been absurd that an issue like that would have been considered a constitutional. These are policy issues. Have the policy debate on it. And I can tell you there's a lot of folks that, may be a little bit more liberal on marijuana generally, but I think are rightfully skeptical of these big weed conglomerates and understanding what they're looking to do to be able to maximize their profits. Okay, guys, hopefully we'll have some news for you soon. Thank you.
Would you support a decriminalization bill?
Thanks for quoting me about open carry, Bill.
Yep.
All right, guys, we're going to move out of an on-the-record session. We'll do a background session with Brandy here, who is in charge of the budget, is here for other questions, financial questions.